Hi, this is Kylie Coo. Welcome to my studio. So I recently made some faux glassine envelopes to hold some embellishments that I'd made for Julie over at the channel Green Macaroni, and a number of you asked me if I could show how I made the envelopes. So today I'll be using some greaseproof paper. You could also use deli paper or tracing paper, some double-sided tape, but I will show other glues as well, a pencil, scissors, a ruler, and I'm also going to be using these scallop scissors just to give a decorative edge, although that's obviously an optional extra. And rather than the pencil, I'm actually going to use a pen just so that it shows up better on film. So I have a piece of my greaseproof paper, and I'm just going to take an ATC and show you how I would measure it out to fit an ATC. Now if you like to eyeball things, then you could simply measure it up this way, just roughly looking at how much paper you need to cover it. But I'll actually show you what I would do to measure something out, and I'm just using the ATC as an example. Now an ATC is 2.5 by 3.5, so those are my basic starting measurements. And I just thought I'd do this little diagram just to show you how I calculate the sizes. So I'm drawing the length and the breadth, and I know that the length that I want is 3.5 inches. And I know the breadth that I want, as a starting point anyway, is 2.5 inches. So obviously it has to be doubled over, so I will add another 2.5. But on the back of my envelope there will be a seam that will be used for the glue, and in my case the double-sided tape that I'm using. So I'll measure the width of my double-sided tape, which is roughly 1/2 inch. So I'm going to add on 1/2 inch. And then, just so it's not so snug, I will add on another 1/4 inch, just to make certain that my card can fit in. On the length, I have the 3.5, and then I want to add on a 1/2 for the fold that I'll make along the bottom of the envelope. And again, I'll add on a bit. In this case I'm adding on a 1/2 inch because I want to cut a decorative finish to the top, and again I don't want it to be so snug that it's too tight a fit. So I'm just going to add those up, and I'm going to be looking at a length of 4.5 inches and a width or breadth of 5.75 inches. So I now know the size that I want for this particular item, which is an ATC. So I'll start by measuring out the dimensions. So I want 5.75 width, and I'll just mark that top and bottom. Now normally I do this with pencils so that it's not seen, but as I say, I'm just using a pen so that it's easier to pick up on camera. Now you could draw a line and then cut it with scissors, but all I'm going to do is use my little marks to get my ruler into place, and then I'll just use the edge of the ruler and tear the paper along there. And just double checking that I'm putting my paper the right way, because I'm now going to turn it sideways to do the other measurement. And I'm just looking over my measurements here just to make certain that I've got it right. So this time looking for 4.5 And again, I'll just mark it on both sides, and then I'll use the ruler, the edge of the ruler, just to tear my paper. And if I just take a quick look, I can see that at this stage certainly it looks like I've got the measurements right. So I'm turning it sideways, but along the length I'm going to place my double-sided tape, and I want to try and get it as straight as possible and neatly lined up with the edge of my paper. The reason being that if it's on squint, then it can knock the dimensions out. So I'll just trim that off. Now, depending on how pernickety you want to be, you can either measure to get the seam down the middle, or if you're not fussed about it being down the middle, it's just a case of sticking the two together. But I'm just going to eyeball this. I want it roughly in the middle, so I'm just going to kind of line it up so that I can work out where the centre of the envelope will be, and this will be the back of the envelope. And of course, because it's greaseproof paper, it has a coating, it's kind of sliding about a little bit, but I just stick with it and just manoeuvre it about a bit until I'm happy that I've got it straight. And then once I know that it's in the position I want, I just make creases in the outer edges. Not essential to do this, but it actually helps to then allow it to fall into place properly when gluing down. So I now have a bit of a fight with my double-sided tape. I of course should have used something to help lift it, but I didn't. So as you can see, because I had the score lines in there, it's going to fall quite neatly into place, and that attaches the two sides nicely. Now if there is any overhang anywhere, it will stick, so I'm just making sure that it's not sticking anywhere on the inside, because you wouldn't want to put something into it that then gets damaged because it's stuck to any glue. So one side was slightly rougher than the other, so I'm going to make that the bottom. Now this could just be folded up as is, but I don't want it to be too bulky, so I'm going to take off this top layer. So again, I'm going to measure the width of my tape, which is 1/2 inch. So I'll just mark 1/2 inch on each side here. Then I'll just use the fold on each side of the envelope. I'll just open it up and then I'll cut along the fold to that mark. And I'm now going to take that piece, and this is the back of the envelope, and I'm going to fold it into place. Again, just putting a kind of crease line along it, and then I'm going to cut this piece out. Now I don't cut this terribly straight to begin with, one because I can never cut a straight line, but also I'm trying to stay in camera, so I've not got it as close as I would normally have, which would have made it hopefully a bit better, but I just neaten it up anyway. So again, you can just see that I've got that little bit of overhang there now, and that will become the bottom of the envelope, which will be folded up. So again, I'm placing my double-sided tape along that edge. Just trimming it off. I can see that it's caught that bottom edge ever so slightly. It doesn't really matter, but I just want to show that at this point it is still open. And again, I'll have a bit of a fight. Oh, I nearly forgot this step. You could just fold it up as is, but to avoid any overhang on the edges, I'm just cutting a little triangle on each edge. And this just gives a neater finish. So I now have a fight with the tape again, but eventually get it. And just smoothing the envelope out, and then I'll just fold this bottom edge up and over and seal it in place. And that's the basic pocket made. And I'll just check here that it's going to fit the card. Now, one thing you need to do is, if you've got something that's got, say, a lot of embellishments, it becomes quite deep because of that, you might just need to add on a little bit extra width to make sure that it fits, but that's fitting quite nicely. And all I'm going to do now is to take my scallop edge scissors and cut along this. Now these, I think it was actually a kid's set of scissors, so they're not terribly sharp. Not great for this, but they do the job, I guess. Now, you can finish off these envelopes or pockets, whatever you want to call them, in different ways. You know, I have seen them where they have a kind of curved front, so it would just be a case of cutting that out. You know, you could use something to kind of trace an edge on and cut around it. But all I'm going to do now is to show you how to make a little make it more into, I guess, a kind of little envelope with a top flap. So here's one that I'd already made. I had made it still to fit an ATC, but just slightly longer. So I'd already glued everything in place, including the bottom, and all I'm going to do now is to finish off the top. And I'm just going to eyeball this. So just open the envelope ever so slightly, just cut down that crease again, roughly the same size on each side. And then I'm just going to glue this into place, again using the double-sided tape. Now you could put a scalloped edge on the bit that you're gluing down if you want. It really just depends how plain or how fancy you want it to be. So just trimming off the little overhang. And I'll glue that piece down. And again, I'm just going to use my scallop scissors just to give that a more decorative edge. I'm just going to neaten that one. And fold that over, and that creates more of a kind of envelope pocket. Now that does bring the seam to the front, and if you wanted to disguise that, you could just attach something to it. So I'm just going to take one of my little word embellishments, and I'll link the process video for making these. I'll link that above. And all I'm going to do is put a little bit of the double-sided tape on there. Now, of course, you could decorate the front of your pockets and envelopes as well, as I did for Julie's. I had stamped a bird on a sheet of a page from a book and attached it. So you can keep them as plain as you want, or you could decorate as much as you want. Again, just neatening it up around the edges, and then I'll affix it. And there we have a basic envelope or a basic pocket, and a basic pocket or envelope with a flap. And I'll just see how this one fits in here now. And I think these are fun to add to journals, or, you know, just to use them as little storage pockets like this. So I'm now going to test some other glues to see how they do with this type of paper. I'm not making full envelopes here, it's just really to see how each side of the paper sticks. So I've roughly marked 1/2 inch, which would just be the kind of flap size. So here I'm taking some tacky glue, and I'm just going to put some on. I'm trying not to put it on too thick, so just little dots of it the full length of the envelope. And I'm going to take my finger and spread that out, because what I don't want is for it to be thick, and when I attach two pieces, for it to stick the inside together. So you'll see it's curling a little bit, so straight away it makes it that little bit more difficult to work with. Not impossible though. And I'm just going to pull that down and into place. So more difficult to see where I was gluing it, simply because I couldn't see the kind of tape through it. And again, just checking that it's not stuck together on the inside. So I'll put that to the side, and I'm going to try another piece now, and this time I'm going to use a glue stick. And again, I'll roughly measure where I want the glue to go. This really is just a guide. And I'm just going to try and keep within that kind of line. So running the glue stick up and down a few times. Now I think if I was making it with these sort of glues, I would measure where I actually want the flap to go to, because it's difficult to put the kind of crease in it when you can't see the kind of back side of the tape. But there it's in place anyway. So I'm going to tidy up at this point and leave these to dry just for a minute or two, and see how they are actually holding. So let's look. This is the one that I used a double-sided tape on, and if I pick away at it, I can actually start to peel it, you know, and that's to be expected. But it's a pretty good hold. I do need to pull it quite strongly to get it to rise like that, so no real difficulty with that one. This is a tacky glue. It's still not entirely dry, but you know, I'm pulling at that, or trying to find an edge to pull it, and there we go. You can see where the glue hasn't fully attached. It's still coming up, but it's held pretty well, I would say. And now the glue stick, which I didn't expect to be terribly good. Again, I struggled to find the edge, but this was probably the least strong, but it actually did a fairly good job. I'd be quite happy with this. It pulls away a bit easier, but you know, it still is fairly strong, so all in all, quite happy with those. So, I know many of you like the sound, the rustling, so I thought rather than doing the voiceover for this bit, I'd let you hear them. I didn't want to do the voiceover, sorry, I didn't want to talk whilst I was making it because it can get rather noisy. But yeah, that's my little faux glassine envelopes. I do like these. Love including them in journals, and yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed this little how-to. As always, thanks for watching. Bye for now.